Building Men is brought to you by Finish the Race Apparel, FTRapparel.com, the creators of all things building men, and by Become Stronger Industries, become-stronger.com, the creators of handmade steel maces, hammers, and other badass equipment.
The first moment where I was presented with the potential of nihilism was praying a prayer before I went into combat in the Iraq War at the push to Baghdad. If there was ever a time where I could be killed, it would be that time. And praying to God that if you're real, you'll kill me. And if you're not real, then you won't kill me. And now I think of that as really a 20 stupid-year-old prayer, because it's like not thinking that, like, I'm thinking somehow I'm in charge of God. If God is God, I am not. And so there's no way that I'm going to shift God off of whatever his plans and purposes are. So it's pretty idiotic. At the same time, I meant it with all of my heart and mind and soul. So because I meant it when I lived, which it really did help me pursue and go through combat and not be afraid to die.
Are you ready?
You're listening to the Building Men podcast with Dennis and Anthony Miralda, brothers on a mission
To help you become the strongest version of yourself, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically.
Finally, we are introducing The Foundation, a powerful online virtual community for young men in middle school and in high school who want to become the strongest versions of themselves mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. Young men who see themselves as leaders in their family, in their community, in their school, and in the world. It's for young men who know that they are destined for greatness. What young men will experience in the Foundation powerful virtual community is the foundational building blocks of masculinity, improved self-confidence, expert mentorship and coaching, improved relationships, understanding and dealing with stress, deeper self-awareness, improved communication skills, improved healthy habits, some mindset work, improved clarity on career and purpose, physical fitness and nutrition guidance, and connection to a strong community. The group will meet starting on Sunday, March 5th, 2023, and will run every 2 weeks, but feel free to join at any time. There'll be high-end guest speakers, group discussions, questions and answers, and one-on-one accountability check-ins. The cost of the program is $47 per month. There's risk-free money-back guarantee if you're not satisfied after the first month. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email, buildingmencoach@gmail.com. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Building Men podcast. As always, I'm your host, Dennis Miralda. I am joined today by a disciple of God, a husband, a father, a teacher, a man who has led Marines into combat, and now he has founded the Leader of Leaders. I'm really interested to talk to this man. Welcome to the show, Aaron Guyett. What's up, my man?
Hey, what's going on? Thanks for having me. Honored to be here, Dennis.
Well, we got to start every time that I have a guy in with a mustache. We're going to start there. When we were first connected, I think Eric Sardina, Return to Authenticity, Eric Sardina had us on, connected us together. And as soon as we first started talking, we started talking about Mike Salemi. I mean, I have a crush on Salemi. I think he's a great guy. And we were talking about the mustache, and you sent me a selfie. You sent me a selfie with the mustache, and I was like, all right. And you actually had it like wax rolled up on the sides a little bit.
Dude. Funny story. So I was getting onto a podcast, and so they were both out.
Yeah.
And one of them was curled under, and I couldn't get it to curl out. And I was like, and this was going to be on video. And I was like, man, this is going to look like crap. And this literally happened 2 weeks ago. So I just I went into my bathroom, took clippers and took them right off.
How long did you have the little wax guys for?
Oh man, I've been rocking that for like a year and a half. So they're growing back out. The crappy part is I'm about to join the Marine Corps Reserves again to finish out my last 3 years of the Marine Corps Reserves, so I can actually collect a retirement. And there's no way that this mustache is even not even this one, let alone the one with the curls. So
are you allowed to have any facial hair in the Marines?
Yeah, you can. It's just got to be a Hitler stash. So, I'm just kidding. Not a Hitler stash, but it might as well be. It's just super. It's like 1/8 of an inch off the lip, 1/8 of an inch off the nose, and then in line with the edges of your mouth. So it looks like a molest-asche, not a mustache,
And usually at the time when people are in the basic training, they're 19 years old. They're not growing anything near where you have on your face. It's that porn stash stuff that like kids grow in high school.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, that's cute.
Yeah, right. Shave it the fuck off. What are you doing?
Take it off your face.
So how long you've had that fear? It's
so
a
I got
substantial
out of the Marine
mustache.
Corps. Yeah, I got out of the Marine Corps at the end of end of 2020, into 2021. Shoot, yeah, into 20. So I've been rocking it for, like I said, about a year and a half, almost 2 years. Yeah, but man, and I'm mourning it. Actually, my kids are like, no. My wife is so pumped though. She's like, yes. And she's learned to love it at the same time. I warned her when we got married. I was like, hey, when I get out of the Marine Corps, the mustache is coming, and it's coming hard, and it's coming heavy.
There's just something about, to me, you see a guy with a mustache, it's just another level of confidence. You know, I have the beard. I have like the short shaved beard. I get it. Whatever. The guys that grow the long beard, it's an investment. But when you have a mustache, it's like you're saying to the world, like, I don't give a fuck what you think about me. Like, I am so confident in myself. I just really appreciate it. So I needed to start the episode off there just to get it out of the way, because otherwise I would be thinking it the whole time we're talking. I had to get it out of the way. Yeah. All right, so let's go back in time. You were you talked about the cheesy, pedophile porn stash of high schools. Did you have that in high school? Did you try the mustache facial hair, or were you
it would have looked ridiculous, like worse than a molest-asche. Yeah.
I love that term, by the way, molest-asche. Did you coin that? I haven't heard.
I don't know. I mean, I've been saying it for a long time. I don't know if I've coined it, but that's what it looks like.
It really does. I love it. I'm gonna start using it. I'll credit you though if I use that in a conversation in the future.
Oh, you don't have to. You just plagiarize the heck out of me. I don't care. I'm sure I plagiarize. So the thing is, in the Marine Corps and certain bodies of people where it's just guys, it gets a little bit ridiculous. We talk about the locker room mentality or whatever, and some of it definitely goes overboard, but I'll tell you what, you glean some of the best sayings in those environments.
Oh, right? Absolutely.
Like talking about fingers, I call them dick skinners all the time, and then the molest-asche. So I guarantee there was somebody else that said it that I heard, and I was like, oh man, that's really good. So plagiarize the heck out of it, please.
One thing that I think our society is missing right now with young men is the ability to bust balls, the ability to be yourself, to be able to. Dick jokes are fine. We need to have that. We need to be able to have that locker room talk as men. We're not trying to intimidate other people. We're not trying to push women down in any way, but just to be able to talk about that stuff. It's healthy. It really is healthy. So I appreciate you bringing it up. So bring us back to Aaron in high school. I'd love to know a little bit about you, what you were doing during that time, who you were when you were a high school kid.
Yeah, I sort of broke the mold that I had put on myself out of, and granted, I've broken through insecurity after insecurity even since then, but there was a massive amount of insecurity in high school that I broke, and I don't know, I can think of a lot of reasons and why it came to be. And I had sexual abuse when I was younger as a kid. And then I kind of lost the cool popular group that I was a part of, going from elementary school to junior high. And then junior high, I was like, because I kind of shunned what they were doing because I wanted to do the right thing. But then because I was doing the right thing, I was like seen as a geek or a dork or a nerd or, whatever. And so then I sort of became most teenagers, pretty anti-authority, and like, I got it all figured out. But it was totally this facade that I've got it all figured out. And really deep down inside, I just wanted to connect with, old friends that I felt like I couldn't connect with. And I wanted to play sports that I always enjoyed playing, but I was trying to be like Mr. Punk, Mr. Cool, Mr. Whatever. And granted, I did play, hockey outside of high school, and I played soccer outside of high school. So I ultimately ended up playing soccer in high school, but our team sucked so bad, our soccer team. And so I ended up, my junior year of high school, I ended up working my butt off all year. And I was like, I shun sports. I And for me, academics was pretty easy because I don't know, the expectation level in public school is like pretty dang low. And so for me, I could kind of pick up on stuff pretty quick. So I never had to do homework and I always passed the test. And that was just sort of my MO. And I wasn't trying to get A's or 4.0s or be a valedictorian or get a scholarship or anything like that. So my junior year, I worked my butt off so that I could afford to do basically whatever I wanted to do. But then in that time, it helped me sort of create an identity where I really didn't care what other people thought of me. And so then I realized, well, if I don't really care, then why am I not playing the sports that I want to play?
Right.
So my senior year, I ended up, playing football for the first time and ended up breaking my arm. I ended up wrestling for the first time, almost went to state. So I went to regionals, and I was basically JV the whole year, but then actually won JV regionals. So that allowed me to go to varsity regionals and then ended up losing there. But I was like, man, I wish I would have started that earlier. But the thing is, I did it. And the whole thing for me, it set the stage for me to go, no, I really want to be a Marine. And so it allowed me to step out and step into that, even though everybody in my culture, my parents, everybody around me was like, no, you go to college, that's what you do after high school and you're smart enough so you can do that. And so I had to apply to colleges and I had to apply for scholarships and got some, but I ended up just bagging it all because I was like, no, I really want to go to the Marine Corps and that's what I'm going to do because I've abstained from this stuff because I was so insecure about myself. So it really broke the mold and let me step into some real difficult challenges and some real life forming circumstances because I was like, hey, no more insecurities. If you want to do it, let's do it.
I love that. And I mean, was there a military mentor in your family? What was it about the Marines that was attractive to you?
I mean, I think every boy kid plays Army or, whatever. But I was infatuated with it. I dreamed about it all the time. And I was really, the interesting part is I was infatuated with the romantic ideal of the military and of the Marine Corps. But yeah, my parents were, if anything, they were pacifists. I call them neo hippies or granolas, right? The 70s granola. I mean, they totally wanted to live on a commune and all this stuff. And they moved up to North Idaho from California, had us kids, and then ended up not on a commune, of course, because got to pay bills. And like we were talking about earlier, once you have a kid, like everything changes, everything's different. But yeah, my grandfather on my mom's side, I barely ever talked to him. My grandfather on my dad's side, barely ever talked to him. But when I did, I always pictured them, because they did have uniforms, but they never said, hey, join the military.
Right.
They were always like, hey, go to college, so there was nobody in my life but my own romantic ideal of what it was going to be, which of course you join in. It totally was not the romantic ideal, but that's why I did it. Yeah.
What was the biggest slap in the face for you once you got there, once you were in basic training? Were they doing the Crucible? Was that still?
Oh yeah.
What was the biggest slap in the face?
One of the first Marines to go through the Crucible. That was back in '99. The biggest slap in the face to me was I have to memorize and do more homework than I ever probably, and I now know because I've gone to college, than I ever had to do in an undergraduate in the Marine Corps to be a warrior, right? I had to memorize more things. I had to learn more things like on paper, do more homework. But because I wanted to be a Marine, it was like, it made it easier. Like the motivation was there. It's like, okay, yeah, I'll memorize these stupid acronyms and, all these obscure facts or whatever. Sure. Okay.
So I'm going to give a shout out to Jacoby Finlayson, kid that I informally mentored, big fan of the Building Men podcast, and joined the Marines in August, went through the Crucible in October timeframe. Yeah. And when he was home, when he got that 10 days off, that 10-day break, first of all, he gained like 30 pounds and he grew like 6 inches. He was taller. Like, what the hell was going on down there? It was and unbelievable. Like all of a sudden his really deep voice. But I was asking him, what was the biggest life lesson? And he said, basically, like, you're broken down to get built back up again. And I said, well, what got you through? He said, the idea of time. He said, there are 24 hours in a day. And he goes, I knew they could take away anything from me, but they will not. All I know is, like, I can do this for another hour. I could do this for another 2 hours. They will not, like, I know what time is, and I have that on my side. And I thought that's really profound from an 18-year-old kid.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, like, what was I mean, I'm sure you learned a million life lessons during that time, but if I were to say, okay, from that experience, if you could give a piece of advice to a kid right before they went in to service, what would that piece of advice be?
I would say first off, don't do it if you don't like really want to do it. Like if you're doing it as a stepping stone for something else, like it ended up being a stepping stone for me to, own a business and go to college and, all of these things. But that was not my mindset going into it. And I think if that is your mindset going into it, it's going to be it's going to be horrible. It's just going to suck. Like you're going to hate the culture. You're going to hate the idea. It's all the things that are hard about it are going to be even harder. Whereas for me, because I really believed in that warrior ethos and I really wanted to be a Marine deep down inside, it was like, yeah, I'll go through any of these things. And for me, it wasn't time. It was like, just make it to the next chow. Like I can make it to the next chow, like the next time we eat or whatever. And then I'll tell you what, then when you get into way harder things than boot camp, like you think that boot camp is super hard. It's just super hard because it's a culture shock. It's just completely different than the way your brain operates, the way you've ever operated with other people. But then I think where the real learning occurs is when now you're embedded in that culture, right? You're broken down, built back up, embedded into that culture. Now you can actually pursue insanely challenging things for reasons that aren't just, oh, I want to be able to, boot camp is like, so I can call myself a Marine, but then every challenge after that, like you're already a Marine. So like, what is it for? And so it's typically, some sort of higher calling, whether it's a higher calling for yourself, like so that I can be more resilient, so that I can know that I've pushed the bounds of my physical ability or push the bounds of my mental toughness, or it can be for even, higher purposes, like for the brother to the right of me and to the left of me, or, even higher purposes than that. And that to me is really what I pulled away. It was like, man, I mean, aside from the things that I'm genetically not predisposed to, like I can't have a baby, right? I can't lactate, but I can do pretty much anything, right? Aside from the things that I'm not genetically predisposed to be able to do, because I now have resilience, because I now have like a stick-to-itiveness and the ability to call upon the disciplines and then the ability to see sort of higher purposes than just to exist or just merely to survive. Like, and that's thriving, right? And that's, I don't know, there's something that, and you can't take that from Marines. You can't take that from people that have that, right? We can take it from ourselves for sure, but you can't take it, if you've got it, you can't get that taken from you.
Building Med Exclusive, first time the word lactate was used by a man on the show. It made me think of Robert De Niro, Meet the Parents. He was Jack Burns. I got nipples. Greg, can you milk me? That's tremendous, dude. I once you said that, again, the locker room talk, immediately I apologize. I stopped listening for about 30 seconds after you said that. Sure. I was trying to pull that quote out of my head. So as you're in that spot, obviously these three guys that I'm going to mention, they weren't household names at the time that you were initially going through it, but guys like William McCraven, who Make Your Bed was his book, Jocko Willink, Extreme Ownership, David Goggins, Can't Hurt Me. Those guys, what the messages that they're putting out there, do you align yourself with one or all of them? Do you see a guy that's out there that's more at the forefront on stages kind of thing that you would align your philosophy on how especially young men should be raised?
Yes, but so and so I would say, yeah, David Goggins is psychotic, but he would embrace that, right? Like he would see that as not an absurd thought or comment. And I think he's psychotic for the right reasons, right? He has the right intention behind his psychosis. If I'm allowed to say something as extreme as psychosis, but because just the things that he's doing is absolutely absurd. But what allows him to do those things are totally not absurd at all. They're totally well within the grasp of every single man that exists. Jocko Willink is a reserved psycho. He's not necessarily psycho, except genetically, he might be predisposed to abnormality. Like, he is not the normal human form. He wouldn't be considered average physically, right? Whereas a Goggins would be more average, and he was fat, which is average, and then he was skinny, which is average, and now he's a beast, but he doesn't look abnormal, right? He looks pretty normal. You wouldn't know that he could just, oh, let's go run 100 miles right now, because I want to. Yeah, and then I can't remember the commander, the Navy SEAL commander.
Oh, McCraven.
McCraven, yeah. I probably would more align with him and his talk, but the Jocko Willink and the Goggins, they have sort of the same thing. It's like everything distills down to some basics, right? A basic ethos, a basic way of seeing the world. And so my butt comes in. So I believe that some of them, if not all of them, and I can't know for certain. Goggins, I in reading the end of his last book, he did profess like sort of a higher power, and specifically a faith in the Christian God. Whereas Jocko Willink, I don't know, and he probably does. Even if he does believe, he probably keeps it secular on purpose, so he can have the widest possible reach for his audience. And then the McCraven, I don't know either. So this is my fault for not knowing them well enough. But I would say that they're 2 steps away from finding a dead end, right? So, and when I say that, I'm saying yes, but yes, these basic principles I think are important. These basic ways of kind of looking to break it down, to distill it down to like simple daily habits, to make your bed first thing in the morning so that you have that one task. That's great until you're confronted with something a little bit more complex, or until you're confronted with something way more disastrous. Like if you encounter maybe your best friend or your wife or your child or your parent, father or mother, dying, making your bed first thing in the morning doesn't do anything to handle that problem. You know what I mean? And so that's my yes, but. It's like, yes, but they're 2 steps of logical inquiry away from losing all of it, right? And so I believe that there ought to be something lofty enough, something high enough to where our earthly interactions won't move that needle, right? It's sort of like a north-seeking arrow. Like, yeah, a tree might get in the way, but it doesn't mean that north still isn't there, right? You may have to go around this mountain, but north is still north, right? At the end of the day. And so that to me is largely what is missing. This greater purpose is largely what is missing in their vernacular or in their system of thought. But all of the other stuff, rock solid. And they would probably be able to counter my, claim or whatever with something pretty profound that actually helps, get people off their butt and pursue even in the midst of challenge.
So Aaron, you grew up and Christianity was part of your life as you were growing up. And you mentioned that you had this nihilistic spiral that you went through post your experience in the Marines. Talk to us a little bit about what you mean by that. And then how did you find your way back? What was there a moment? Was there just a series of things and events that happened?
Yeah. So the first moment where I was presented with the potential of nihilism was praying a prayer before I went into combat in the Iraq War at the push to Baghdad. If there was ever a time where I could be killed, it would be that time. And praying to God that if you're real, you'll kill me. And if you're not real, then you won't kill me. And now I think of that as really a 20 stupid-year-old prayer, because it's like not thinking that, like I'm thinking somehow I'm in charge of God. If God is God, I am not. And so there's no way that I'm going to shift God off of whatever his plans and purposes are. So it's pretty idiotic. At the same time, I meant it with all of my heart and mind and soul. So because I meant it when I lived, which it really did help me pursue and go through combat and not be afraid to die. Like I was always the point man, first to enter a building or any sort of really sketchy scenario. And even though I was, a squad leader or section leader, I had no problem, volunteering for really difficult missions and getting in front and just leading from the front. Which was totally, I was living my romantic ideal though. That was the cool part of that, I guess. But it didn't feel very romantic at the time. It was pretty intense. But yeah, just being able to take that in stride and be okay with getting shot at, being okay with getting, indirect fire, landing near me, being okay with being ambushed, being okay with all of that, because in my mind, it's like, well, I'm already going to die anyways, if God exists. So here we are, and when I didn't die, it's like, okay, well, God doesn't exist then. So if God doesn't exist, and I started to do the complex math that follows that, it's like, well, then there isn't really a greater purpose. If there's not really an ultimate purpose to any of this, can I glean some sort of momentary purpose? Yeah, I can, but it's arbitrary. I'm slapping crap against the wall and calling it purpose, but it's not really purpose. It's just, I feel like it's purpose. And so I'm like, man, where everybody's in this, like, feels like it's purpose. Everybody's pretending to believe in, something greater, and then doing good because there is actual objective morality, which it can't exist outside of God. So it's like, man, we're all just playing pretend. I was like, okay, I guess, I mean, I don't believe in any of this, but I'll play pretend so that I don't look like the weird guy. But ultimately, I really didn't care, and not caring about anything, not having purpose, not having meaning, sent me into a death spin, like a death spiral that led me to, I ended up getting arrested, but I was like drinking and fighting and just being an idiot. And some of this was like trying to handle my insecurities from my past, as well as, post-traumatic stress stuff from combat and what I saw there. And then like being put back into the civilian world and not feeling like I fit with anything anyways, plus not believing in purpose and meaning. And so really not having any value set, and just like grabbing value sets because money's cool, or a car is cool, or chicks are cool, or, whatever. But all of them like just worthless, like at the end of the day, and just like trying to find the bottom of TikTok or Instagram or, whatever. And it's just brutal, man. And so in that, I was like, I couldn't shake this inner feeling that, man, there are people that seem to be authentically believing that there is something greater than themselves there. And then I can't shake this feeling that, a man abusing a woman is just wrong. Like, but if nothing matters and nothing exists, then that's not actually wrong. It's just people call it wrong. And I'm like, man, no, that's wrong. Like, why can't I shake this feeling that it's wrong? And so then I started trying to find an answer, and trying to find it anywhere but Christianity.
Right.
Like, please let there be a better answer than, what I grew up witnessing.
Building men of character, integrity, strength, compassion, and empathy through coaching, mentoring, professional development, facilitation, and motivational speaking is our mission here at Building Men. To work with me, information is in the show notes on our website at buildingmen.io, or you can send me an email at buildingmencoach@gmail.com. We are here to help you become the strongest version of yourself, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. Now, back to the show. So you went down, you looked at Buddhism, Hinduism.
And the big one for me where I went super deep was like Self-Realization Fellowship, or which is like tons of, it's kind of next to Hinduism. Lots of meditation, lots of work-based sort of faith, and spiritual humanism, where it's like, but both of those at the end of the day, it's like you're worshiping yourself. Ultimately, you end up, you're just worshiping yourself. And to me, I just found that really problematic, because the grand characters of history that worship themselves were like Hitler and Mussolini and all these people that killed millions of people and justified it because they had the right plan and it was from them. And it's like, man, no, like humanity is valuable and incredible, but humanity worshiping itself is disastrous. At least that was my framework. That's my observation. And so it was like, man, there's got to be something else out there, just as long as it's not the Christian God. So yeah, I dove super deep into self-realization fellowship and spiritual humanism. Like years of meditating multiple hours a day, and reading the Bhagavad Gita, and reading all of the books that they would have you read, and then getting a spiritual mentor, and all that stuff. And I think that was a good stepping stone, in that it helped me understand sort of the depths that humans can go to help heal themselves. Like, I think humans can take a very active and significant role in the healing of themselves. Like, it really did help me find myself, so to speak, right? And let go of some of the past stuff. But then ultimately I was like, I realized I was just building a statue of myself in the end anyways, but just doing it in a much more peaceful way, I guess. I don't know.
You're familiar with the original Ghostbusters, Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray. Oh, yeah. Any diving into Gozer, the Gozerian, Gozer worship, anything like that? No, you never got into that?
No.
I have to ask. I always, I'm waiting for someone to be like, yeah, I worship Zool. I was into Zool. So now you're in this space where you've tried a whole bunch of things. You're trying to figure things out. You went down many different paths to try to find the path of not here. And every single one that you went down is leading you back to what you initially thought. So how did you work your way back from all of those different trials and tribulations back to finding your way into Christianity? How did that work out for you?
Yeah. So I was like, okay, well, I don't believe that, finding my deeper self, finding God in my deeper self is a path worth following, in that it's ultimately worship of self. And I see myself as the problem. Like, my choices have consequences, generally good choices, good consequences, generally bad choices, bad consequences, but I'm filled with both for sure. And so there was this like heavy dualism, which I had always sort of appreciated, I think, since reading Lord of the Flies in high school. And so I was like, well, in spiritual humanism, I felt like you're 2 or 3 questions away. This is what I was saying with the 3 prominent figures that I think are probably pretty good figures for men to follow, right? I would agree with you on that, like the Jocko Willinks and whatnot. But I was always like 2 or 3 logical questions, philosophical questions away from finding the end of that, where it was like the end was the beginning, which was me, which was the problem in the first place. And if I'm not the problem, definitely humans are part of the problem. We're part of the solution, but we're also part of the problem. And so if humans can have some higher purpose, some higher meaning, and more importantly, something that's objective. So if it's objective, then it's outside of them. If we have objective morality, then we can actually have a scale from which we can measure right and wrong. But if we have a subjective morality, if it's us that's generating it, well, then right and wrong is whatever we feel like is right and wrong. And whatever we feel like is a slippery slope philosophically, right? And so I was like, well, it seems to me that there's all of these religions that are a very works based, where it's coming from me to feed me. I'll give Christianity a try. And I'm going to give it the same try that I gave, spiritual humanism, specifically in Self-Realization Fellowship. I'm going to dive head first. So I'm going to get a mentor. I'm going to go to church regularly. I'm going to join a men's group. I'm going to read the Bible, front to back. And at the time, I was pretty good from the objective moral standards that I would come to believe and own, I think right now in my stance. And I was pretty good, except that I was literally objectifying women. Like, women were a tool for my desire, not humans, not of worth, not of value. Even if I would say verbally that they were of value, my actions quite rapidly would betray those beliefs. And so they weren't really beliefs. They were it was believism. I just said that women are valuable. And then yet I'm like using, 20 different women to fulfill my sexual desires and make me feel better about myself, which is obviously totally opposed in Christianity. And so I felt like when I was reading the Bible, I felt like that was like smacking me in the face every page that I turned. And I was super convicted in that. And then, but I would just be real about it in the men's groups and just say whatever I felt and whatnot, and then say whatever I felt to this spiritual mentor. I remember he had taken me on this trip to India, a short-term missions trip, where I thought like, oh, God is love, and love is this amorphous thing, and it's the universe, and it's this energy that pervades everything, and everybody has it, and and everybody can get more of it, and all this stuff. And yet, my trip to India, the first time, I just compartmentalized all of the brutality that I witnessed every single day. I was able to easily compartmentalize it. Come to the point where I finally I let go. I was telling my spiritual mentor at the time, like, yeah, I want to believe in God. I want to believe, that Jesus Christ lived and died and rose again. I want to believe that he did that for me and for, the wrongs that I have committed and potentially will commit, and the wrongs for everybody else. I want to believe all of these things. But just because I want to, I know that I'm not actually believing him. Because if I was believing them, then I wouldn't just know it. I would also show it in my life. My actions would follow that faith, or the Jamesian faith without works is dead. And I didn't have works. I just professed that, oh yeah, God exists, and there's this person in the Bible called Jesus, and then there's, some historical claims and things like that. And he was like, well, at some point you have to actually take a leap of faith, like a true, in whatever belief system that you have, at some point there's a gap, and you're going to have to step into what you think is probably midair, right? And hope that there's some sort of solid something on the other side. You're going to have to give your life up, literally sacrifice your life and serve somebody that's not you. And in this case, it was Jesus. It was like, okay, you got to serve Christ. And I remember it was May 21st, 2009. I was at a Starbucks, and I sighed. I had that conversation with this guy, Ian Stevenson, that was mentoring me at the time. And as I was leaving, I was like, all right, Lord, it's all yours. And it was at that point that everything changed. And most Christian testimony stories are like, and then I was blessed with a beautiful marriage, and I had kids, and everything was fuzzy and beautiful and rainbows. It was the exact opposite. It was at that point, it was perfectly timed with the bubble popping in real estate. And I owned a fitness business down there. And we had like 18 different locations. We had 20 plus trainers, over 600 clients. And I literally got 75% of my business ripped from me. All of my friends, because none of them were Christians. So all of my friends left me and were like, man, you're a fanatic and you're a weirdo. All of the girls that I had on Rolodex, gone. And I had to call them and confess and tell them, hey, forgive me for treating you other than human. I'm living a lie if I don't ask for forgiveness. And sometimes they would accept it, and sometimes they'd be like, like
Right.
it was brutal. I lost, like I had a really stark widow's peak. It like
Yeah.
came down to here, and I lost it, gone. I lost 30 pounds, and I was like 210 pounds of steam and muscle. Anyways, but I lost 30 pounds, and that, like, aesthetically, that was how I was living my life. It was like, I
Right.
needed to look a certain way and act a certain way and be a certain way. And all of that got stripped from me. And I felt better than I had ever felt in my entire life. I felt more content without any of that stuff than I had ever felt in my entire life. And I was like, man, there's something about this. And so then since that moment, it's just been, hey, it's all yours. I don't know. I don't deserve any of the things that you bless me with, but if you bless me with it, I'll be filled with joy. If you take things away, I'm going to choose joy. Like, it doesn't matter. I'm serving you till my dying breath. And I mean, and now I can look back and be like, all of that stuff was happening for reasons. It looks super harmonious from hindsight, looking back at it. But in it, it was brutal. I was just getting pelted with the world and what the world judged me on. But it was like, man, I don't care, because I have what is most important. I have an ultimate purpose. I have ultimate meaning. I have values that actually mean something, to me, and that I can walk out. And even if the world throws me the worst, I can be strong and have a strong foundation in these values, even if the world's telling me that I'm an idiot and I'm stupid and whatever else. And now I've got a wife, a beautiful wife, and 3 amazing kids. I live in the mountains of North Idaho, back in my homeland. I've got a nice little property. But the thing is, that would be the world measuring, how success is. And so from a worldly standpoint, I'm successful now, but it has nothing to do with world. It has nothing to do with worldly success. It has everything to do with, like, okay, can I walk out a life that's in true service to a higher power, to God in Christ, through the Holy Spirit. And I don't know what else to say. I'm truly contented.
I appreciate you taking us through that whole journey, Aaron. And it's interesting, when I first started the actual Building Men group, when it was a boys social group, it started in 2005. And I asked the boys in the group, 13, 14 years old at the time, and these were things that I believed. I asked them about what they thought a man was. Like, tell me about, what are things, characteristics, qualities that you hold in high regard. And they built you before all that shit happened. What they did was they said, a man needs to be jacked. He needs to have a 6-pack. He needs to be the strongest guy in the room, bench this, be able to do things physically that can dominate. He needs to be able to bang as many girls as he possibly can. It was about sexual conquest. So how hot were the girls and how many girls can you be with? And then it was about the stuff, the money, the cars, the things. You had all 3 of those things going for you. You were what the kids built up, that I was saying, it's not about that. If you're trying to base your masculinity around Aaron Guyett of 2008, you're barking up the wrong tree. That's not where you need to be. And so for you to actually go through the experience, one, I mean, I appreciate you telling us about that. It really validates the lessons that, that I was helping the boys learn. And it wasn't just me telling them, it's they needed to go through and understand that, because I could tell them until they're blue in the face. It's not about how many girls you're with. Then they get into high school and they have they're walking around with a boner all the time. That's what they're going to think.
Yeah.
I would think that was one of the things that was the hardest for them to recognize, was about the opposite sex. So if you're giving advice to, say, a group of kids at 17 years old right now, that's all it's about. How would you be able to package that in a way that's easier for them to consume, that it's not about that? Like, don't base your masculinity around sexual conquest.
Yeah. So, I mean, the cool part is I feel like they have an allegory, or they have a metaphor in their hands. and it's the swipe right, scroll to the bottom, you will never reach an end to that. That conquest never ends, and it always gets. So just like chasing the dragon with opium or an opioid of some type, right? Or a drug, we can know that, that first hit that brings you into, la la land, and then after that, you're chasing that original high. The problem is you get better at physiologically, you get better at being able to handle this invaded substance in your body. And so you never quite reach that peak, that moment, right? And sex is even worse, because probably your first encounter with sex is a disaster. But so you're like, oh, well, I'll make it better, and then I'll make it better, and I'll make it better. And what happens is it actually gets taken from you. The good of it gets slowly removed. It goes from it could be better, it could be better, it could be better as you're chasing it, and it gets the goodness of it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And so then we do things like we try to make it weirder, or we chase different stuff, or whatever the case might be. And then it gets even smaller and smaller and smaller until it becomes no longer good. It's no longer enjoyable. And maybe you have an orgasm, in your ejaculation or whatever. And that helps some firing and wiring to make you continue to do your conquest in the same way that, people get addicted to pornography. But you cannot tell me that ejaculation, that orgasm is anything of what you're desiring in your mind's eye about what sex should be, right? Or could be. All of these things, it's far bigger in your mind, and it gets only smaller in your experience. So small that it starts to ruin you, like, especially if you get addicted to it, get addicted to multiple women, or get addicted to pornography. It starts to ruin you. It actually starts to pull from any other areas and aspects of your life to try to prop up this false reality that you're living in, that somehow you're going to find true fulfillment in sex, in sexual conquest. And so you're actually stealing from areas where maybe you do have some goodness, right? Maybe you do work hard and you make money, and that there is something contentful about that, something satisfying about that. Or maybe you do give to other people your time or your money, right? And your energy, and there is something good about that. Well, it'll start to steal from those things that actually do give you deep satisfaction, so that you can prop up this existence that is sexual conquest. And before you know it, you're left with and I think the Bible puts it really well. You're left with a false idol. A false idol, it's just fake. It's a fake thing that you're continuously worshiping, but it's fake. It's not even real. And so you could go through that whole tirade. This is what I would tell a 17-year-old, right? Hopefully they get that concrete image and feeling of it that I just talked about. So you could go through a whole tirade, a decade of pursuing that and discover that. Or you could do what most 20 stupid-year-olds and most teenagers will almost never do, and that's listen to wise counsel and then pursue things that are of worth. Listen to people that have been there and done that, and can give you some good articulation and really help you feel the feelings that you don't want to have to experience. Like you don't, do you need to go be strung out on heroin in order to know the travesty that's going to ultimately prevail and create in your life? I mean, I guess some people do, but I think the majority of humans don't, right? They can understand, do you need to go kill a bunch of people to experience total depravity in prison for the rest of your life? No, like you can know that those things are wrong. So in the same vein, know that this is wrong. Like, you think it's cool because culture has inundated you with propaganda saying that it's cool. But I'm here to tell you, it ain't cool. And you don't look cool doing it. You look like a fool. You treat humans that are of worth and of value like they're lesser than human, right? That's you. Like, you are the Hitler. You are the Mussolini. You are building the Gulag archipelagos and putting women into it, right? You're creating the concentration camps and putting women into it. That's who you are when you're doing this, because you've objectified, you've made them non-human and seen them as only a thing to fulfill your desire. Man, that is so wrong-headed in so many different ways. I'm just trying to build some good concrete imagery around it. Or you could maybe pursue a right path and find out what true intimacy is without sex. And then when you have sex, it becomes truly satisfying, truly contentful. There's so much contentment in that moment because you have brought up the value of the person that you're connecting with in a physical way, in a mental way, in a spiritual way, right? You've brought up the value, and in so doing, you've also brought up your value, and now you're two valuable people connecting, right? There's going to be so much more intimacy, so much more satisfaction, so much more love, true love, which is really what we're after. We're trying to use lust to get this value, reciprocated, this beautiful union reciprocated that we can't get. And so it's like, oh, well, I just need more women then. More women. And then lowers the value. And then we wonder why it escapes us.
I would love to have taken that clip, go back in time, get in a DeLorean with Marty McFly and play what you just said for the kids in the original Building Men group. It was really powerful, Aaron. And I'll go back to one thing that you mentioned initially when you were talking about your high school experience. You said you came to this realization, this epiphany, that you really didn't care what other people thought when you were a senior in high school. Hopefully kids that are listening or their parents help your son get to that point where he doesn't care what other people think. I think a lot of the thing with sex in high school or with chasing the women, it's this status symbol. So I think young men are using it as that. So it's the idea of how do you get young men to care about what's important, to fully invest in something that's important, and at the same time not care about the opinions of other people. That's the tricky spot for young men. It's like, it's the idea that, I can truly believe in something and not put value in other people's opinions. So one thing that I thought about as you were talking, I think that young men, the superhero that I would most associate young men with is the Hulk, right? Because I believe in humanity. I believe in human nature. I believe that young men, kids in middle school and high school and beyond, they want to do the right thing. They really, really do. I believe that they are good human beings. That's what I see with the kids that I work with. I do believe inside there's this monster that exists, though. That monster can take several different forms. It could be the anger that can overcome them, especially in a competitive sense. It could be anxiety, it could be depression, it could be sadness. In this case, it could be lust, right? So you talk about those deadly sins and things like that. And the monster inside them, they're constantly fighting with it. And that's the battle of adolescence is knowing you want to do the right thing, that you have that, but you're constantly struggling against it. That's the closest analogy when people are like, what are teenage boys like? I'm like, they're like the Hulk. They're constantly struggling against that. So, and part of what you do, Aaron, is you've developed this idea of rites of passage. And I'm such a huge fan of that. And so there's a couple things, and we don't have a ton of time left, but I wanted to have an opportunity to dive into this a little bit. You talk about 12-year-olds earning adolescence, that there's this idea of rite of passage, and then 16-year-olds earning guided adulthood, and then 18-year-olds earning the independent, responsible adulthood. Just reading through that, it speaks so clearly into what I am doing with young men, and especially with those who are working with young men. There needs to be ceremonial rites of passage, and developmentally, I think you hit it right on the head. 12, 16, 18. Those are big, like, landmark age ranges for kids. So talk to us a little bit about each one of those little rites of passage moments for kids, and like what is a part of those things that you developed.
Yeah, and so I think it's important to think with the end in mind first, right? The independent adult is a truly independent adult. So they're 18 years old. They can do all of the things that 18-year-olds can do. But more importantly, because I think we think, oh, that means they can buy cigarettes and buy nudity magazines, which doesn't even matter anymore with cell phones and whatever. They can vote, right? But it's like, no, not so much the 18-year-old societal legal rights. They can start to form their adult minds. They have enough wherewithal and maturity and experience from the other rites of passage where they can independently make decisions and, more importantly, be responsible for the freedom that they now have. And I think that that's something that's waning in our society, even at 35 years old or 45 years old, where we see a bunch of people that want the freedoms, but don't want the responsibility that's associated with those freedoms. And so it's about that. And so obviously their brains are still forming, until they're in their mid 20s. Their bodies are still forming typically, especially men. Right. And so there's still a lot of formation to do, but if it doesn't start with a good foundation, then anything that's formed up from that is just going to crumble, right? You don't build a house on sand, the parable from Jesus, right? You build it on a solid rock. And so if you're building on a solid rock, it's like you understand beliefs, you understand values, you understand your purpose, you understand, that things have greater meaning than just yourself. And you understand that if you make a choice, if you make a decision, you have to be responsible for the consequence that comes out of that. And the beauty is, if it's a good decision and a good consequence, like, man, that's an awesome place to be. The hard part is when it's a bad choice and a bad consequence, like, that's a crappy place to be. But man, if we had men and women, but men on the Building Men podcast that owned that, society would look a whole lot different, right? And we might not be so distracted by all these deceptive narratives that, they're pulling us into these rabbit holes that really are just ridiculous, and having us chase things that are really just ridiculous and don't have any depth, don't have any meaning, don't have any foundational things to build upon. So in order to do that, okay, how does the 16-year-old rite of passage need to play into that? And then how does the 12-year-old rite of passage need to play into that? And it's like, well, the 12-year-old rite of passage going from childhood to adolescence, okay, I'm going to give you now the freedoms that an adolescent would have that this child doesn't have, right? This child has every area and aspect of their life controlled, or at least some authority over it, right? Even if the authority is a screen. Unfortunate for for those of us that have parented with screens, but those of us that have know that, right? And but so the adolescent is going to have some different stuff than the child. And what is some of that different stuff? And so what are some of the things that this adolescent probably needs to know that will be able to be built upon in that guided adulthood, as well as will give them some ways in which they can be responsible with the freedoms that they're now given as an adolescent. And so it's sort of like the beginnings of freedom. They're starting to, okay, you can be home alone. You can go out with your friends alone. I'm okay with you going to the swimming hole to go swimming. I'm okay with you riding your bike this distance. I'm okay because you understand some basic human survival skills, as well as some basic human maturity and understanding, right? You can start to formulate who you are in this world that is around you and how you see that world. It's not fully formed, and it won't be fully formed for any of us until, maybe it will never be fully formed. I don't know. But you kind of get it. And then the 16-year-old is like, okay, let's test these, and let's test these in a way in which you're now in charge of more than just yourself, And I think that that's in the important switch from adolescence to adulthood. It's like, no, you realize that your choices impact more than just yourself. And if you realize that, then community is important. Family is important. The way you walk around, your attitude, your posture, your presence, all these things are important. All these things matter. And you can take responsibility for the freedom of that, or you cannot, and then see the damage that creates in the lives of the spheres of influence around you. And so, yeah, I do a 5-year-old rite of passage from childhood to adolescence, and it's just a couple of hours each day, and then the final day is like a kind of a full day thing and an overnight thing. And then if they pass it, then they get celebrated by the family and community, and it's ceremony, like you said. The 16-year-old is now they actually lead our entire family. This child leads our entire family on a 10-day. A very difficult, and in our case, we do like a mountainous backpacking trip, because nature is inevitably going to put her gnarly hand on all of us and make us feel miserable in moments. And then the distance covered will be another set of, potential issues. And then the logistics of that. And then did we train well enough? Did you train us well enough to be able to handle that? And so then they're sort of met with this very hurricane-like or wave, where a wave meets another wave, and then it becomes this huge tsunami. It gets dumped on them, but if they can weather that and help their family weather that, well, man, you've earned guided adulthood. Now you have almost all of the freedoms of an adult, except that you live under my roof. Right. And so you still have to adhere to my rules because you live under my roof. And I know that there's going to be rebellion and all sorts of, and that creates great topics of conversation, great learning opportunities. But I also know that, man, they were able to go through something extremely difficult, wiring in trauma, so to speak, but trauma with boundaries. So they're not, it's not like old school rite of passage where like, you might die. It's like, you're not going to die, but you're definitely going to be pulled, and pushed and prodded in every single which way. So you can actually earn something that's worth earning, right? And say like, man, I did that, I earned that. And then the community and family can come around you and be like, man, you earned that. Like, proud of you. You're now a guided adult. Yeah. And then into, the reverse engineering that we did from the beginning.
I love that. And how will a young man know what he's capable of until he's put to those limits of his capabilities?
Exactly right.
It really is a powerful thing. So tell the audience, before I ask the last question, Aaron, tell the audience where we can get in touch with you, find you, figure out more about that program you were just telling us about.
Yeah. So you can right now go to discipledinchrist.org, and I've got like a 100-day discipleship course, but the rite of passage course is on there, the whole curriculum, the whole training, and it's all absolutely free. And I just hope that, like we were saying, plagiarize the Molest-asche. Plagiarize it, please, like take it, use it. It's free. I just feel so deeply about the need for something like this that I'm like, I'll just give it away. I want parents, because really it's about parents being intentional with how they're raising their kids ultimately, right? And I want parents to be intentional, and this gives you sort of a blueprint. You don't have to use it. You can play jazz with it. You can pull some value from this and then get some value from some other things, however you want to do it. But it's there for the pickings, discipledinchrist.org. And then I think you have to create an account, and then you can jump into the courses for free. And by creating an account, it's like name and email. That's right. Yeah. That
is awesome. I mean, as far as the episode goes, I'm right on the fence between two different titles, either Greater Purpose with Aaron Guyett or Plagiarize the Molest-asche. I don't know. It's like whoever's listening, it's a totally different experience depending on what I name it. I might flip a coin after the episode is over.
Well,
we'll see
if you want clickbait and ultra low expectations, the former or the last.
Latter. Yeah. That's awesome. All right. So last question, Aaron. Dude, this was amazing. I sat back as I was listening to you. It seemed like you were up on a stage just preaching out. Like, this is the word that we all need to be listening to, and appreciate you leading us down that journey. I really, really do, man. It was a good hour for me to spend with you. I know people that are listening got a ton of value from your story, your wisdom, but I'm listening right now and I press stop, right? It's the end of the episode. I press stop. There's one thing that I can do as a listener right now after this episode is over. And by doing this one thing, whatever this thing is, it could really change the course of my life. What's that one thing I could do right now?
So it would be to begin a morning routine, I would call it, but it would be to begin a morning habit that will turn into a routine that will become a lifestyle. And it's very much in the same vein of make your bed. Start with something small and doable, and watch it slowly build into something incredible and truly lifestyle changing and so then therefore life changing. And for me, it began with just a simple affirmation. I'm awake, I'm alive, I'm energized, which is at the beginning of my spiritual journey. And now it's turned into complete and utter devotion to the Lord in scripture, time with my wife, in very intentional time with my wife, very intentional time with my family, to set the stage for the day so that when I'm going into the day isn't attacking me and ambushing me, I'm ambushing the day. And I'm doing it from a right attitude, a right place, a right perspective, as opposed to, well, I'm just going to kind of show up and see what happens and then getting washed and blown about by every wind and wave of new teaching and new shiny thing and whatever. It's like building in intentionality by just starting small, an affirmation, maybe a push-up, maybe a quick, minute of journaling, maybe a minute of reading, something super small. And bridge it with something that you normally do in the morning anyways, like maybe brush your teeth or drink coffee or something like that. But yeah, that has, man, that will be the beginning in which, a seed starts out small, but then it grows into, a huge, like an acorn starts out small, grows into a huge oak tree, or the mustard seed. Right. It's amazing to see how powerful that is in people's lives.
Love it. Another one thing that you can do as a listener right now. Aaron Guyett, my man, thank you so much. Appreciated the last hour. Building Men audience, go one step further than you thought you could go. We'll see you next time on Building Men.